like for instance, if you're going to investigate the medical profession, you need someone who has got some sort of medical knowledge.
Okay, that sounds fair. Let's get to the point about crime, because tonight is about crime. What experience do you have of crime in Brixton, and what's going on with our young people on the streets around crime?
Well, Brixton over the years is changing.
Yeah.
It's very multicultural now. The Brixton from 10 years ago is completely different. When you go down to Brixton Market, there's so many different stalls. It's a wide, diverse community, Latin American, Polish, Afghan, Asian community. And it's changing dramatically, almost beyond recognition. But one of the issues that we do have, and it's not just in Brixton, is around youth crime.
Okay.
And that is probably one of my biggest concerns within the community, is trying to deal with the gang culture, the gang mindset that are affecting the small minority of our young kids. And that's my biggest concern. Through the work that I did, time and time again, I was seeing young people who were being killed and being knifed to death, and they were being killed by other young people, other young children. I mean, when I say young people, we're talking about children.
Yeah.
And that's time and time again, our children are actually dying on the streets.
Well, I had a statistic in the video that I sent out that 6% of young people, 10 to 19, are in gangs. Do you think that is true of the area where you work?
I wouldn't say 6%. I don't think
Okay.
they would say that. I mean, those figures.
The Home Office said that.
Right. Okay. I wouldn't.
They're
say
not mine.
Yeah. I mean, the gang figure, the numbers that are involved in the gangs in Lambeth, for instance, are really quite small. But it's the level of violence that is used that is
Right.
the most shocking thing, and the ages that are involved in the level of violence, and that is the most shocking thing. So there was a death that kind of really struck home with me of a young boy, Zach Olomegbon, who was brutally stabbed to death on his way to school.
Yeah.
And that kind of really struck a note for me. And I thought, if a child on his way to school can get murdered, something's desperately wrong here within us. We've got to look at ourselves and thought, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And it's too many young children dying, and there comes a time when you just can't avoid the stench of my young children and their bodies. So I kind of brought our community together, different contacts, different community groups, to address and speak to what are the issues there. And there's a whole range of issues that were discussed around family values, respect, parents' rights, for instance, drugs in the community. I know a whole range of issues. And one of the things that came out of it was we needed support for our parents.
Okay.
To give them the information and advice to try and forewarn them and stop our young children from their young children to getting into gangs. A lot of our parents don't realise what is happening to our young children. They don't spot the signs until it's too late. And too often, sometimes, when police go into and they do a raid on a house, in the bottom of a bedroom or in the wardrobe or something, we'll find drugs, a knife or a gun, and the parents are totally unaware because they haven't spotted the signs. So what I try and do through an organisation within Lambeth called the Lambeth Black Families Forum, is to give the parents the information and say, you can't take things for granted.
Yeah.
You must be intrusive into every aspect of your child's life. You must know who they're mixing with, because peer pressure makes a hell of a lot of difference. If they're going out with little Joe, where does Joe live? What is he like? He could be the total wrong person to be mixing with. And when they're going out, look at the way they're going out, because people turn around and say you shouldn't judge people by the way they dress, but some of our gang members, very active gang members, dress in a certain style because it helps them to elude police. So when you've got youngsters who, like on a hot day today, for instance, who are going on with thick puffer jackets on and woolly hats on and their hoodies up, then it makes us suspicious as to why they're trying to conceal their identity. Why would they dress like that? And that is typically, dark clothing is typically what a lot of our very active violent gang members will wear.
So it's knowing those signs and looking out for them?
You learn signs and looking out from looking out for behaviour, not being afraid to search. You must search your child's room, you know, because things get brought into there, whether it's drugs or guns or knives. And that goes for boys as well, girls as well as boys as well. So not being afraid to search your rooms. Look at the social media side in terms of, you know, the websites that they're going on. Look at, you know, don't be afraid if you've got a very young child. Interrogate his mobile phones. If they want to hide things from you, then that should be alarm bells for you. They should be, what are they hiding? So you've got to be intrusive. You've got to look at everything, and try and spend as much time. I spoke to a young girl the other day who was in and out of prison, and she was involved in crime. And I said to her, what would have stopped you getting involved along that path? And she said, and I've heard it time and time again, she said, a better relationship with my parents. And that starts from a very, very young age. It doesn't start from 13 or 14. It starts from when they're very, you know, you're 5, 6 year old, and just being in that constant contact with them and have that close relationship. Because too often we get tied up in our outside lives and jobs and paying bills, and then we leave the streets to raise our children, and that's when things go wrong.
Okay. Some comments in the chat room, which doesn't surprise me. I think we need to be clear about the clothing. That's the same beliefs that led to the shooting of Trayvon Martin. Yeah, clothing is only a very small aspect. Yeah, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm not. Well, the Trayvon Martin case, I'm not fully. I mean, I understand the basics of the case, but I'm not fully understanding. But when it comes to the clothing, all I can do is give you my experiences in terms of what it's like on the streets, for instance, and I'll give you my experience from like on Lambeth streets, and the gang members that I've seen, and they dress in a certain way. So, you know, what I tell to parents is that don't let your child, if he's innocent, get caught up or try identified in the same sort of manner that those gang members are getting involved in. And they will dress in dark clothing, because when a victim typically will turn around and say, well, describe your assailant, and you say, well, he was wearing dark clothing, he was wearing black. And if every child is wearing black, it's difficult to identify, you know, with that individual. So if your child is wearing something that's distinctive to himself, which is different from just a general black colour, then he's, you know, he's less likely to be, you know, singled out as a possible suspect to be stopped and searched.
Okay. Just if any of our listeners want to join the conversation, if you want to give a call in to 01 582 877 308, you can ask a question, you know, on air to Errol Patterson. We have him for a short time, and I know, you know, this is a passionate subject for a lot of us. People are quite concerned about gangs and what's happening, particularly in London. I know Dean has given us statistics there. I don't know how true those are, but I'll let you have them. Gangs Line say 80% of all gangs in London are African, Caribbean, Black, British, and of mixed race descendant. Do you think that's true?
I'm not sure about the mixed race descendant side of it, but certainly we do have within the, you know, African Caribbean community or the black community, whichever you want to describe, we do have an issue in terms of our children dying. That's the fact. There's no two getting away from it. You talk to everyone in the streets, you talk to the elders in the street, you talk to the parents in that. They realise that there's a real problem.
There is.
And they're desperate to try and how do we evolve it? How do we stop this? And I think by giving parents the information to watch out for these signs, we can begin to turn the tide around. And just realising that we've got to take control of our children's destiny, because we can't keep doing this, and it's our future that's dying on the street. Some of those young boys, or young girls even, they could have turned out to be, you know, great leaders. We don't know.
Absolutely.
But they've been caught. You know, they've been killed brutally, you know, stabbed for no reason whatsoever, and therefore we've lost our future. Those are our future leaders that are gone. So we need to try and address that, and the way to do it is, I think, is start within the home.
Okay, so I hear the conversation about starting in the home, but the young people themselves, some of them are no longer children, some of them are near enough adults. And we know that there's a problem with some parents in terms of the communication that they have with their children, and whether, you know, they're on board with what's going on, and whether they even have control anymore. So is there any work that we can do with young people to actually start them to address some of the issues themselves? Do you do any work particularly with young people and their behaviours and addressing that whole problem of crime and gangs?
Well, I'll do, there's a number of different organisations out there, grassroots organisations there, who are able to tap into young people's mindsets. The Metropolitan Police Service in itself is probably not going to be very effective, because there's certain stereotypes and inbuilt prejudice that the Metropolitan Police who came out there, that young people probably wouldn't turn up. But grassroots organisations are probably more effective, because then they can bring people who's been through it. Say, I was once involved in a gang, and this is the lifestyle, or this is the horror that I went through, and therefore it's not worth it. So we need to tap into those people who've had experience in it, and that's the best way. And there is a number of different programs out there, and people need to just be aware of they are, and different diversionary groups as well, who are doing a very effective job at delivering these services. I know in this day and age with cutbacks in terms of funding, it is difficult out there, but there are still groups that are doing fantastic work. There are some unsung groups who are doing fantastic work, and the churches, some of the youth churches out there are doing absolutely amazing church. I know there's a youth church in Lambeth called Ministry of Grace, which has got a large number of, I think about 60 to 80 young people, run by this one lady, and she's turned gang members around, and she's turned them around to lead a proper Christian life. And she's done it amazingly, a lot of it in the beginning without any help or support, and that's just through her own belief, and then just through her own love. And there's some of the gang members there who were actually talking to her, and they said, that's all we need. It's just someone to really care about us, and that's what we as a community need to try and do, is address that issue, and say, well, you know what, I'm not going to prepare to put up with, and I do care what happens to you. Okay,
love that. Okay, another question in the chat room. What part does community centres being closed down, I think what Blaps is trying to say, what part does that play, the closing down of community centres, in sort of supporting what we're trying to do, which is keep young people on the straight and narrow? So if they're losing their community centres and the places to go, which we traditionally went as young people, how does that help the work that you're doing?
It's difficult. It is very difficult. This country is going through some very tough economic times, and the government is repeatedly saying to us that they don't have the money, and we have to make these cutbacks everywhere. It's a pity that the frontline services, our future, are bearing some of the brunt of it. But we can do something ourselves within the community to try and address it. We can't just hold up our hands and say it's all lost. We need to just find solutions. And that's one of the things with the Lambeth Black Families Forum, is that it's not about finger pointing. It's about, all right, okay, we have a particular issue here. What is the solution? What can we do? And within the black community, we've shown through history that we can come through all kinds of problems and issue there and find solutions and ideas. Mm-hmm. And that's what we need to tap into our creative knowledge, and say, right, how do we solve this? How do we care about each other? And it's not always about money.
Okay, sounds wonderful. Dean is also saying, when the community services break down, the burden then falls on the family, who are often ill-equipped to deal with the problems within their community.
Yeah, and then that comes to an issue about, this is one of the issues around with the Lambeth Black Families Forum, is that we used to have what is known as a wider community. This kind of concept of it takes a village to raise a child.
That's right.
And back in the days when, when things, when you were, you had problems with a child, whether it is you had an uncle, you had many uncles or friends around there who would be able to help with this. Go to and help. And we seem to have lost that somehow along the way. And we need to re-establish those values and bring them back into the younger generations who are coming, like the 5 and the 6-year-olds, and turn around and say, look, come round and meet your uncle, come round and see that, and introduce our children into the positive role models that are out there. So we need to reconnect that community spirit that used to be there in the past. Okay,
going to take a little break, allow you to swallow a bit, have some water, and we're going to play a song. That's the way it goes, Simon Webb, because sometimes that's the way it goes.
Absolutely.
Okay.